Hello everyone, Michael Lee Parker, and we are here on YouTube, and I want to welcome you to another session here at You Are a CEO. And today we're talking about why leadership is not a skill, and we're going to be talking about a breakthrough in leadership development that all entrepreneurs need to know about. Now, first, I want to remind you, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, do all the YouTube stuff. But we're going to be talking about something very critical, very important. I'm happy to be here again with you today. You see, I got on some URCL gear. If you are interested in URCL gear, go to shop.urcl.com. Now, when we think about You Are a CEO and we think about leadership, we think about entrepreneurs and how all entrepreneurs have to be leaders. And we always talk about here at URCL that leadership begins from the inside out. So we start with self-leadership, and then we move on to leadership that is without, both in professional environments or in entrepreneurial environments, even family, home environments. We all have to be leaders if we really, really want to succeed. Now, before I go too far and I talk about this breakthrough in how we look at leadership, I want to talk about why is leadership even important? Why is it critical, especially to entrepreneurs? Why is it so important? Why do we even need to care how leadership is developed? And why have so many people got it wrong when they just say leadership is a skill? And I want to explain some details about that. But first I want to share with you some things that came out in a Forbes magazine article where they did research and they began to explore many of the entrepreneurs who failed, what their, biggest problems were. In fact, they had 11 critical problems that each of these entrepreneurs really, fell into one of those buckets in terms of why the business failed. Now, when you think about why the business failed, I want you to notice something, but before that, I want to show you this list. So let's go to my whiteboard here for a minute. I want to explain to you some of the things that were identified in these pitfalls. These were basically 11 key pitfalls of entrepreneurs that really caused them to fail. So I want you to hear each of this. Number one was not having enough money, okay? I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining this. I know we all understand that. Another one, number two, was not knowing your market. So this is another important thing that entrepreneurs must do. We must know our market, where our customers are located. Number three was the lack of vision. So not having enough vision. You started something, it was a lemonade stand, so to speak, and you want to turn that into a real business, but you didn't have a vision on how to do that. And then number four was biting off more than you can chew. Okay, so this is another big one, biting off more than you can chew. Now, we know this has a lot to do with taking on too much, right? Too soon, too fast, and how it impacts the business. Number five was trying to be everything to everybody, okay? So this is, again, where sometimes people are trying to please everyone, and sometimes we've all maybe experienced a little bit of that, where we're trying to live up to other people's expectations, what other people think we should do, what other people think we should become, what other people think we should succeed at, and it causes us to have problems. Number six was not enough marketing. Not enough marketing. And we know if we don't, marketing is essentially trying to get the potential customers out there to turn and look at you. They don't know you. You're just another company out there. And then all at once the market turns and it looks at you. So marketing is extremely important. Now, number seven was poor planning. Poor planning. And then number eight was not accepting constructive criticism. So this is another critical one, and some people just really can't stand receiving constructive criticism, and this causes them to maybe close up, feel like they can't move forward because they feel like it's a personal attack instead of really seeing the value in it. Number nine was not delegating. Not being able to delegate responsibilities to others, so they end up trying to do too much on their own and failing. And number 10 was the lack of soft skills. Now, those of you that aren't familiar with this term, hard skills is things like working a computer, being able to do certain things physically that, you know how to use this particular software and application, you know how to do things specific to a specific job or something that requires you to physically do this or that. More of a hard skill. Soft skill is things like your ability to, notice that someone is having a problem, to be able to discern things. Soft skills could be like communication. It could be the ability to, actually work with other people. These are more what we call soft skills. And the lack of those soft skills was seen as one of the critical things. Now, number 11, which probably is a result of a lot of these, is burnout. And burnout just means I'm overwhelmed and I just end up, burning out. And so I want you to look at this list. Now, a case could be made for how many things up here are leadership related. Now, we're talking about the things that cause pitfalls out of, thousands upon thousands of businesses. And when you really got to the germ kernel reason of why they failed, these were the things that came to the top. Forbes magazine, you can look these things up yourself. Now, think about this, though. Let's look at this list. So there could be a case made for different things, but some of these are really clear. Lack of vision. This is a leadership issue. Knowing, seeing how far a business can go, being able to have a vision of what you want to do, biting off more than you can chew. That is a leadership issue. Not knowing how to set priorities and making work manageable and understanding exactly what you can handle, trying to be everything to everybody. This is a leadership issue, right? Now, let's say not enough marketing is a marketing issue, but think about poor planning, right? Definitely a leadership issue. Not accepting constructive criticism, leadership issue. Not delegating, leadership. Soft skills, leadership. Burnout, it was because of the lack of leadership, not being able to prioritize everything, so you got overwhelmed and you burned out, right? And I could, go a step further in terms of, not knowing your marketing stuff, even though that's marketing, but it's a leadership responsibility to understand that's a part of the vision as well. But just look at how many things on here are directly related to this thing we call leadership. So my point is, just to give some context to what we're going to talk about today, this is why this is so important, because this literally by itself can destroy your business. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you know. I don't care what you sell. If you don't have leadership in your business, if you don't understand leadership, eventually it'll cause that business to explode or implode. And sometimes an implode is worse because it's something destroyed from inside the business, right? And sometimes things happen, it was an explode, like, the pandemic hit certain industries and destroyed their businesses. That was like an explosion, right? But imploding is when there was problems inside the business that leader didn't know how to handle, and it slowly began to cause that business to fail. So we don't want any one of those plodes, if you will, explode or implode. We want our business to succeed. Now, I want you to think about it. I'm a basketball player. I've always loved basketball. And think about it. There's you think about who's the greatest starting five. And some people would, they're going to be the Michael Jordans, the Kobe camp, the LeBron camps. There's going to be the Bill Russells and people who go back to Larry Bird and Magic and all the great players, right? But one thing is for sure, when you think about leadership, if you don't have leadership, you won't even see teams really begin to win. I love understanding about both, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. They weren't able to get over that hump until Phil Jackson came into the picture. So think about that for a minute. Michael Jordan, he had Scottie Pippen. He had all the other players. He couldn't get there. When Phil came in and he had a different leadership approach and he found a way to corral that aggressive energy in Michael Jordan, what Pippen was and what Horace Grant was and Bill Cartwright, for those of you that remember, and John Paxson and so forth, someone had to put that together and to lead that team and to cause them to believe in something, right? And he had some pretty unique, unorthodox ways of leading. He had them meditating and thinking different about all kinds of things. And when Kobe couldn't get over that hump, who did he call? He called for Phil Jackson. And what happened? Results begin to come. Now, it's not, we know the players on the floor have to make it happen. But my point is, if you don't have a leadership with a clear game plan that's able to pull people together, that's able to get people to rally behind a common vision, a common focus, you will not be able to win. And there's a championship that we all want. It's not just our business being on television. It's not just having a logo that we could say we created. Our businesses literally can take care of our families. It can fulfill our dreams. It can allow us to have the vacations we want, to have the fulfilling life that we want. It can help take care of our generations behind us. All these things are all bound up in our business. That's why we have to care about leadership. Now, I hope I got your attention about leadership and why it's so important. Now, here's the thing that we've been all messed up about that I want y'all to understand is we've been told that leadership is a skill. It's something that, it's more of a toolbox. And you can go in that toolbox and pull leadership out. And so let's do a scenario for a minute. Now, let's go back to my whiteboard for a minute. And let's say we have Dave here. And Dave, he went to an event here. So I'm going to draw, this is our event center here. And he went to this event center. Inside this event center, he heard some powerful information, right? And in that whole information, he got a book. He also got access to a platform where he could watch a bunch of videos and so forth. And Dave said, I'm going to become the best leader because I went to the leadership explosion, the leadership extravaganza event. And so what did Dave do? Dave said, I'm going to go straight up to the mountains and I'm going to read all this information. And when I come down from this mountain, I'm going to be a better leader. Now, one of the things when you think about, being a better leader, so one of the challenges is when you think that you can read a book, go to an event, go to a seminar and, pick up becoming a leader as just a skill, right? If you feel that you can just go and get that, right, by getting something, knowledge in your head, and then going and doing it, you are completely wrong. And this is why so many people fail, not just when it comes to business, but even in life, because they don't understand that leadership is not something that you grab as a skill, it's something you must become. So leadership is not a skill, it's a behavior that demonstrates skills in a certain way. So there's a subtle difference, but it's very important. And if we switch our thinking from leadership being something we can pick up and use like a hammer or a screwdriver into something that we must become and be shaped and molded by, then we'll understand the pathway to becoming a leader is very different than it is being more analytical or learning how to write or learning how to communicate. Those are skills, learning computer skills, learning how to use a software. But see, you as a leader is something that must be cultivated and developed. So when you switch your thinking, right, and we say, instead of me thinking now, when Dave come down from that mountain, he gonna have some knowledge. He gonna have some knowledge in his head. And this is the challenge. Some people get some knowledge. They read a book that told them maybe what good leaders do, how you should think, and so forth. That's cool. That's a part of it. But there's something more. So Dave took that approach. And when he came down, he had knowledge, but he didn't have the actual essence of what it meant to be a leader. So what'll happen is when you begin to take things that you begin to look at as a skill that you can just pick up and put in your backpack, when you run into a scenario that is not in the book, and when you run into a personality that wasn't at the event, and when you start, realizing there's a issue amongst people that wasn't on that blog, you find out very quickly that leadership is something that must be in you. And it must emanate through in your skills that you use, because you're using those skills from a place of leadership instead of looking at leadership as a skill itself. Now, this is a very deep thing, because if it's a skill, we can just go to a training. But if it's a behavior, we have to get in an environment, because environment is what shapes behavior. Now, let's this was Dave, but let's go to someone else here. Let's call her I don't know what I want to name her. I'm going to name her, let's name her, I want to name her, let's just go with Sally. You know, there's always a Sally somewhere. And Sally here, give Sally a little bit of hair coming off here. Now, Sally didn't go to the mountains, but Sally began to surround herself in an environment. Now, I want you to really, really get this and understand this, because when you think about an environment, there are certain elements to it that are critical. And I want to remember these 4 L's. One is to listen. So when you think about listening, so when you get a chance to listen from those, right, you want to listen from those who have mastered, let's say, elements of leadership. You don't want to just listen to anybody, but you want to listen to some people who have mastered certain elements of leadership. So let's say, you know, Sally, she was willing to listen. So this is really, really critical. There's something being shaped here. Another key L that I want you to remember is the willingness to learn. Okay. Now, learn is another critical area, because being willing to learn continuously is critical to leadership growth. Being willing to learn continuously. So, you know, this is what Dave, you know, he was willing to go learn to a certain extent. But being able to learn continuously, there is a behavior that has to turn on that is also just as critical. Now, here's another one, is to look. Now, look has to do with looking at real life examples. Real life examples demonstrated. So actually demonstrated. You actually saw what it looks like to portray that type of leadership behavior. So this is something very deeper. You know, now we're getting into the fabric of something. Now, the 4th L is really critical. This has to do with live. So we have to begin to live the example until it becomes a part of us. So this is very important. Now, keep in mind, you know, Sally, because she was willing to do this, what we're talking about really here is an environment. And this is actually the breakthrough in leadership development that I want to talk to you about, is environment-based leadership development. Now, when you understand an environment is what really is needed to shape a leader, you start thinking differently about how can I create an environment that will help shape me into a leader. Now, why is that so critical? Why do so many people fail to lose weight? Why do so many people struggle to break habits? Why are there so many people that can't overcome addiction? Because they focus on trying to do that thing instead of creating an environment that will motivate and shape them to become the person who doesn't want to do that thing. What do I mean? Now, it's one thing for me to say, I'm not going to ever eat donuts again. I told you my whole thing I went through when I was trying to change some of my health habits, wanted to cut back, you know, stop eating sugar. And so, you know, I was in fits. I just went cold turkey and tried to stop eating sugar. And I was in the bed, you know, shaking and stuff, saying, I don't know what I'm going to do without this, because I truly, you know, I grew up. It's all I knew. And I wanted to make a change. Now, here's where people make the mistake, is they just say, you know what, they think that willpower is going to allow them to make that change. This is how people view leadership. I'm going to be a better leader because I read the book and I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to be better at moving and getting people to work together because I went to the event and I'm juiced, I'm stoked right now, right? Some people might say, I'm going to make sure it happens because I believe I'm going to do it, right? And you leave those events. Repeat after me. Are you ready to lead? Yeah, right? And you get all motivated. That's willpower. But see, what'll happen is you'll find out why so many people break those resolutions every year, because willpower has a limitation on it. And it begins to fall apart when you lose your motivation for continuing to do that because the cost of doing it has become greater than your willingness to achieve whatever goal that was. Your desire for that thing, you go back. But when you start to think about environment, so what did I do? I started to change my environment. I cleaned out the pantry. I removed the candy drawer I used to have. I started to talk to the people in my home about what I was doing so they could hold me accountable, in terms of what was going on in the home. Got my wife on board, got all of my family there in the house on board. This is what I'm planning to do. Then I began to speak publicly about it, and I created a public environment so that not only in the home, but at work and everywhere else, my friends and my community, they knew what I was trying to do. I was starting to create an environment around my life that made it hard for me to break my own word. So people struggle to be on time because they focus on being on time instead of creating an environment that will help them be on time, like preparing things the night before, getting things ready, starting to make adjustments in how things are organized and looking at the things that cause you to be diverted from your time. Stop, planning something too close to one another. Start creating an environment on your schedule. It's a different way of thinking. It's how I'm going to create an environment so I can become that thing, versus saying I'm going to pick it up and use it, and then I'm going to go and build something. So we have to think about great leaders like Dr. King. We appreciate the leadership that they showed in many different ways, but did they pick that up as a skill, or was there an environment that shaped them into the leader they became? When you start to study their journeys, you find out, you remember what happened at the Montgomery bus boycott and how being called upon to rise into the front of a movement that you weren't even prepared for, being thrust into a situation where people were calling upon you to rise up to pressure, and you began to be shaped and molded by the environment that was around you. You saw examples, you began to study, you began to learn, you began to live it, and you began to grow into something that became a great leader. So we have to start being concerned about, if we understand what I'm talking about, we have to be concerned about who are we allowing to put things in our mind? Who are we spending our time with? Who are our closest friends? Who do we get advice from? What do we watch online? What is it that we allow to consume our thoughts? What is it that shapes who we are? What types of decisions do we make every day about how great we want to be? What things do we put around our life that motivate where we're trying to go? Are you hanging around people who are not trying to go where you say you want to go? Well, you're going to end up going the place that the people around you are going, because the environment is stronger than your willpower. I love talking about the surfer on the ocean. And he rides that ocean wave. Actually, the last time I was out in Hawaii, I learned a little bit about surfing. So somebody was out in the ocean. They said they would teach me. They had a board out there, so I thought I would jump on. And I said, this can't be that bad. So I jumped on that surfboard. I fell at least 12 times. I mean, it was hilarious. And I'm so glad there's no video footage that I know of. But I kept getting up in the wave, and my legs was wobbling and down there again. And then I would get up and again. And my willpower was like, I'm going to do this. In fact, I think before I leave this ocean, I'm going to have this thing mastered. I said, I have this. Y'all know, if you know me, I'm pretty competitive. So I said, I'll have this mastered, figured out. After the 10th time falling into that water and trying not to hit different reefs and stuff, I realized that I need to be true to the people who surf and get in the environment to become that, right? So why do you think when you want to be a great football player, a basketball player, a ballerina, a military, someone who has joined the military, you have to go to that environment and become that? So when you realize that, you'll look and think differently about what it takes to really, really, truly become a great leader. And I say become because it's a process. Now, let's go back to my whiteboard here for a minute. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about, when we think about the ground, and you take a seed, right? And when that seed is dropped down here into the soil, right, something begins to take place. And this begins to sprout up. And leadership is more like this. Something that I must grow and develop into. So If I want to grow quicker as a leader, I need to be in the best possible environment that has all the ingredients I need, such as this plant, water, sunlight, the right type of soil, that I will be able to grow as quickly as possible. So I want you to understand this, and this is so important to me. It's so near and dear to me because I want you to understand that you are a CEO. That is what we are the leaders of, is environment-based leadership. That's why we created a Leadership Accelerator and a platform to help people grow as a leader faster. That is what this is all about. So I'm passionate about this. So I want you to think about this seed, right? And I want you to think about this. The first thing that seed has to do is it dies and it ceases to become a seed so it can become a plant. If you're going to become a leader, you have to die. There's something there that has to say, I don't want to be who I used to be. I want to be a leader. I want to be better. I want to grow. I don't want to stay the same. I want to change. See, if you don't have that, I don't care how many books you read. I don't care how many times you get motivated. I don't care how many people speak to you and make your hair stand up. If there's not something in you that is willing to say, I've made up my mind, I don't want to be a seed anymore. I want to be a tree. And when you make that decision, something starts to happen. And if you take that decision and place it in the right environment, growth will begin to permeate. And I guarantee you, when you take an environment-based approach to leadership development, you're going to see 10 times the speed of growth in every area. So go back to my whiteboard here. So instead of looking at it as a leadership skill, or I do this, I do that, I look at it as a seed that's planted. Now, something begins to grow more, right? There's something that begins to grow. A few leaves start to come on here, right? And I start to grow and blossom. Then the next thing you know, this is getting, even bigger. This is how we have to think about leadership. These branches represent situations, things I've come through, things that I'm understanding, mistakes that I've made, learning from other people, learning from other leaders, learning from other entrepreneurs, learning from other professionals, learning from other people that were success-minded and wanted to make something of their life. Until eventually, this goes from just some branches here, as you can see, start seeing something else start to develop. Start to develop something. There's a tree here starting to form. And there's something starting to happen and something starting to blossom. And, there's fruit, hanging off of this tree, in different places because you've learned something. And I want you to understand this. This is so important because if you don't understand this, you won't realize that because, if you learn about being analytical, learn how to use a specific software, if you learn how to communicate better, if you learn how to problem solve, if you learn how to critically think, those are things, that are really good. And sure, leaders need to do that. But those are skills. The key is who you are will take those skills and use them differently when you become a leader. So I can take a training on a skill and still not be a leader. So I'm going to use that skill in a way that doesn't exhibit good leadership. So this is why so many people take a talent and a skill and they think they become a leader, but they just take that talent and skill and it ends up hurting other people and not getting to the fullness of what that skill can actually do if it was filtered through someone who had become a leader. So when you become a leader, the skills around you all begin to exponentially benefit because the person using the tool has changed. And this is what we're talking about. And so I want you to understand, we are now talking about, I want to leave this with you, last but not least, we are talking about environment-based leadership development. This is the breakthrough in leadership development. A lot of people say, well, my goodness, this makes a lot of sense. Where in the world do you go? Glad you asked that. And that's what URCO is for. And we've created a Leadership Accelerator to help people do just that. So make sure you stay around this community, not just the content here on YouTube, but we have many programs platform services, and even a membership community that'll help people to actually do this. And that's why I'm so excited. And by the way, I have a free leadership training right now, not on this, but on some other things that'll really help you as an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in that, it's free. It's worth over $5,000. I'm doing it for a limited time. And that is at thepowermember.com/test-drive. And we'll put that in the description area for you. And you want to keep on learning. Like I said, it's one of the ways you want to. We talked about live. We talked about learn, right? We talked about look. We talked about all of these elements and how they all work together, how they all help to shape. And if you allow that to happen for you, not only will you be able to impact everyone that you touch, you'll be excited to know that leadership is not something going to come and go. It's something you've become, and you can use it anywhere that you go. I hope you enjoyed this session. I see some of you here with me live, and those of you that will see this later, make sure that you like and you subscribe and comment, do all the YouTube stuff so you can keep us coming back with more content to help you not only run your business, but to run the business of you. I'm Michael E. Parker, and I'll see you next time.